Hello everybody. Today we are going to do a simple sphere with a light source on toned paper using the white charcoal pencil and a regular charcoal pencil. You can either use, if you have one of these guys, great. If you have one of the other ones that you unwrap with the paper, also works fine, so it doesn't really matter which one you're working with. But today we're just going to work with charcoal pencils, and the whole point of this assignment, reason I give it to you, is that it forces you to start thinking about value and shape and less about working with like linear, like you're working just with line. So often when we draw, it's really easy to get into the habit of drawing outlines and thinking in terms of outlines and only outlines. And when you do that, it can kind of almost hurt your drawing in terms of making it look realistic because we're putting lines in where they don't exist. So this is also an exercise in helping you to see value and understand where the darks are, where the lights are, and where the midtones are. So when we're drawing just with white on black, or like black on white, it's easy to, again, think of trying to draw something in terms of kind of what your mind tells you it is. Like if I were to ask you to draw a tree, you would probably come up with some idea of, a trunk and, some leaves or something like that, or whatever you decide to do. But if you were to go out inside and actually draw a tree and try and actually draw exactly what you see, might be very, very different as far as what we do. So we want to steer away from kind of this idea of drawing from our head and instead really focus and observe what's going on in the picture. So the first thing we're going to do is just practice with the charcoal, and this will allow us to get used to this idea of using the paper as a midtone. So the paper itself is going to be our medium gray, and we're only going to be focusing on the extremes. So the lights are going to be our white charcoal, the darks are going to be our black charcoal here, and everything in between is the midtone. You can see how we're going to try and get to that point. So the first thing we want to do is establish our white and our black and our midtone, and then we'll do the kind of in between from there. So figuring out kind of those almost light but not quite as bright, and almost dark but not quite as dark. So that 5-step process, and that's what we're going to see in the sphere here, is that we have our brightest bright and our darkest darks, and then our midtones where we're going to see very little. And we want to smooth it out and blend it so that the transition from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next is very subtle. We don't want big stripes going across our drawing. Okay? So we're just going to kind of use this as an example, and we're going to go through our drawing. So let me sharpen my pencil here and sharpen this guy right here. Okay, and you could stick this guy in a regular sharpener if you need to, and obviously use your sandpaper and X-Acto knife if you want to as well. Okay, so first thing I want to do, I can start out with my white or my black, it doesn't really matter. Luckily for charcoal, we can erase it if we draw really lightly. So I'm going to start out with just the black, because I have a black background essentially. I'm going to go in with the sphere here and establish my core shadow right out of that tangent line, right? If the light comes down against this right here from this direction, it's going to hit here, and then what happens behind this as the light goes, the form goes away from that light, that's where we're going to begin our shadow, and that tends to be nice and dark right in there, which is what is called our core shadow. Okay, and I'll establish kind of a background because it's always nice to place it on something. and give it some context, and then we're going to have a cast shadow back in here. Okay, so that's starting out right here. So let's go ahead and figure out our value chart and understand how to go from here to here. So start out with, we'll go 5 boxes. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes. This box is going to be nice and black. And this box over here is going to be white. And as I stated before in the assignment, you can do this on just regular cardboard if you don't have toned paper. Let me go grab this real quick. So you can see I did this drawing on a piece of just a box, an Amazon box. And you can still get a really nice drawing. In fact, I almost prefer working on the cardboard because it's a little bit, even though it has these ridges, you can always use your tissue to, you know, smooth stuff out. And I like how the charcoal actually sits on the cardboard more than I do with the paper. The paper has a little bit more of a tooth, a little rougher, and so it gets in there. But I actually like kind of how it sits on the cardboard. Anyway, so if you don't have the toned paper, you can do it right on just some simple cardboard, and it works great. So let's continue this. I'm gonna grab a tissue, and we'll continue. So I have my black here. I have my white on the other side right here. And this is going to be my mid-tone. Notice how if I just go a little bit dark here and a little bit light here, this paper itself is going to be my mid-tone, and I won't do anything in that box. So I'm going to take my dark charcoal here and just really lightly put in my value. I don't want to go too dark. In fact, I'm going to take this tissue and just kind of pull out a little bit what I have here. I'll use my eraser. It's still a little too dark, so if I come in here and soften that up a little bit. Okay, and then I want to clean that edge up and clean that edge up. Okay, so we're close there. And the next one, come in here, and again, we kind of want to find that mid value between the here and here. And there we go. There you have it. So we have a bright value here, our bright white, our light, our midtone, our dark, and then our shadow, our core shadow, kind of that, our extreme dark, our shadow. So when I come back into my sphere here, let's use these values that we've kind of created. We're going to blend them, obviously, so they're seamless, but we want to establish our darkest darks and our brightest brights first, and then from there we can kind of understand what's going on. So I'm going to start out here. I'm going to put in Sorry, it's shaking. I'm going to put in this right here. And this I'm going to establish. My light source is coming down here. This is kind of going around the sphere. In fact, if you were to see the other side of the sphere, right, this would kind of look like this, right? It'd kind of come around like this. So, right, so it's going to hit and it's going to move around the sphere. One common mistake that we see in spheres with light sources is we shade it with the curvature of the ball and not with the curvature of the surface. The curvature meaning the curvature of the ball when I refer to kind of like making it mimic what's going on right here, which doesn't actually happen, right? The brightest point is here, and then it emanates out from there and goes around the surface of the sphere. So I need to be able to kind of give that illusion of the light hitting and kind of cascading over the top of it, like if you were to, you know, see like water coming down and slowly moving around something. Those particles of light, as they hit the object, are going to kind of have that effect. So we already have our shadow here. Let's kind of establish this a little bit more. And we have our cast shadow here. Hit and go across like this, and this is going to come across like this, so it's going to come out to there. And that's going to be our darkest area, and this core shadow is going to be our darkest area. This right here, brightest point, is going to be right here, at least in terms of the form itself. It's going to be very bright right here. Now we can come back in and we can place in a reflected light, a kind of highlight, if this were a very shiny object. If it's a matte object, if it's something that isn't very glossy, then it's not going to do that. So it would just be kind of the form itself. So I'm just going to come in here. And this is what's called turning the form, right? Where we slowly get lighter or darker going away from our light source. So what I want to do is I want to be kind of progressively lighter as I go, and lighter meaning I'm not going to push as hard as I go towards my shadow. And I want to eventually get to a point where I'm not putting anything at all and it kind of seamlessly moves into my shadow shape. So I'm just coming in like this, always thinking about the surface, not about the shape, but about the surface, right? We're pushing the idea of form now. So that's our brightest area. And then as I come right here and go around, I'm going to soften that up. And as I go around it, I'm just trying to be lighter and lighter and lighter. Sorry, this is shaking so much. Okay, and so I kind of have done that. I want to get rid of my stark black outline of this because that's not important to me anymore. And I do want to get rid of this right here. So I just wanted to get rid of these big black outlines, because if you were to look at a sphere, it's not going to have a big sharp outline around it, right? That will make our image look flat, like a cartoon. So, all right, so here's this. I'm going to kind of come in and just hit my background a little bit. That will help me see that bright elements. And there we go. Okay. Okay, so I've established my light, and now I'm going to come in to the dark. And all I want to do is just smooth it out, right? So right now we have this big stripe of the midtone, and I don't want a stripe. I want it to be much softer, a softer edge. So I'm just going to come in here, and along this line, I'm just going to just blend it ever so slightly so that it goes into the light. And this still is going to become receiving light until we get to that point where it goes away. The surface goes away from the light as we turn the form. So once it hits, as it comes around, this is all in the light, and then it comes into right there as it goes away. That's where you're going to start that shadow. So I want to be careful about not letting that dark creep into the light. And that changes depending on how close your light source is to the object. Right? If I put the light right on top of it, right, that could change things. Whereas if I bring that light wall way, way far back, then that light becomes you have much more ambient light, and the shadow isn't as defined. So that's kind of where we want that shadow to be, right there and right there. That's where we would see that. Okay, and come in here and soften that. Soften that, and then I'll just use my eraser to kind of come back in and pull out. There he is. We do want some reflected light. Right, this is not going to be super bright. We don't want it to be really bright, but we do want to show that there's some light that's bouncing back. Okay. Let's see if I can fix this.